My name is Lawson Mercer, and a year ago, I found myself staring at a piece of paper that would wreck everything I thought I knew about my life. It wasn't divorce papers. It wasn't an affair confession. It was something worse. It was a contract drafted by my own wife. A real, printed document waiting for my signature. It was a gray Sunday morning. I was making coffee, still half asleep, when Marlene walked into the kitchen wearing the blue sweater I bought her for our 20th anniversary. She didn't sit down. She didn't smile. She just slid the folder across the counter and said, almost formally, "I need you to agree to this." No good conversation ever started with paperwork. Inside was a short, cold agreement. 6 months of total autonomy. No communication. No questions asked about her whereabouts. No restrictions on personal exploration, including intimacy with other people. A mutual understanding that this was not grounds for resentment or judgment. It even had a space at the bottom for both of our signatures, like it was some corporate arrangement and not the dismantling of a marriage that had lasted 25 years. I looked up at her, trying to find the woman I knew, the woman who used to fall asleep on my chest during late-night movie marathons, the woman who cried at dumb commercials and squeezed my hand 3 times when she said she loved me. But all I saw was a stranger in my kitchen. "Why?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Marlene didn't blink. "I need to live without being tethered to someone else's expectations," she said. "I've given enough of myself to this marriage. I want to experience life without regret." I swallowed hard. "You mean without me?" She hesitated just for a second. And that second told me everything. The coffee pot beeped behind me, loud and shrill in the thick silence, but neither of us moved. She wasn't asking. She was telling me. And somehow, despite the rage and humiliation bubbling under my skin, I stayed calm. Because something about the way she delivered it, so neat, so rehearsed, didn't sit right. It wasn't just a midlife crisis. It wasn't just a woman losing herself. This had planning behind it. Layers. Secrets. And right then, while the ink was still drying on the so-called freedom contract, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for her. I was going to find out what really drove her to hand me a permission slip to be abandoned. And trust me, what I uncovered wasn't anything I could have prepared for. The days after Marlene left were strange. Not chaotic, not dramatic, just hollow. The house felt too big, too quiet. Her shoes were gone from the hallway, her favorite coffee mug was missing from the cupboard. Only the scent of her lavender soap still clung to the bathroom like a ghost refusing to leave. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe this was just a phase. Maybe after a month or 2, she'd miss the quiet rituals we built, morning crosswords, late Sunday drives to nowhere, her humming while folding laundry. But deep down, I knew better. Marlene wasn't planning to come back the same. If she came back at all. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I didn't want the pity looks, the forced advice from friends who had no idea what this felt like. I went to work like normal, mowed the lawn, paid the bills, but in the background, a fire started to grow inside me. Because something didn't add up. It was too clean. Too calculated. The way she had that contract prepared, the way she packed her bags without hesitation, the way she didn't even flinch when I asked if she loved me. So, one rainy evening, I poured myself a whiskey, pulled out my laptop, and decided to start digging. I began with her emails. Not breaking into them, I didn't even have to. We still had a shared family laptop that she sometimes used for online shopping. And there, in her browser's autofill history, I found things that made my stomach turn. Private dating sites. Memberships under a fake name. Reservations for singles resorts, booked months ago, long before she ever gave me that freedom speech. But it didn't stop there. Receipts. Plane tickets. Messages to men whose names I had never heard, some sent while we were still sharing the same bed. She had been planting the seeds of her new life long before she asked for my blessing to betray everything we built. My hands shook as I scrolled, but not from sadness. It was something sharper. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. She didn't leave because she needed freedom. She left because she had been preparing for her exit like a general planning a war. And in that moment, I realized I had 2 choices. Sit back and let her rewrite the story of our marriage into something disposable. Or quietly gather everything I needed to finally understand the truth and decide what to do with it when the time came. I closed the laptop, finished my drink, and stared out the window into the darkness. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the beginning of something much bigger and much uglier. I just didn't know yet how deep the betrayal would go. But I was ready to find out. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache, but there was no time to wallow. I knew if I didn't act now, the trail would start to vanish. People cover their tracks faster than you think once they sense you're sniffing around. Marlene had always been smart, calculating in ways I hadn't fully understood until now. If she had the foresight to draft a freedom contract, she probably had backup plans for everything else too. I started piecing things together methodically. No rage. No drama. Just cold, focused work. I combed through old receipts, credit card statements, phone bills, every tiny thing that might hint at where she'd been or who she'd been talking to. It didn't take long before patterns started to emerge. Certain restaurants she visited without telling me, Uber rides ending at addresses far from her supposed book club meetings. Then came the breakthrough. One of her loyalty apps, an innocent-looking point system from a local coffee shop, had location histories. I cross-referenced it with times she claimed she was stuck at work late or visiting a friend in need. The data painted a very different picture: late nights at upscale bars, trips to a fancy condo downtown, and, repeatedly, one name that kept popping up in reservation records: Kellen Pryor. I had never heard of him before. He wasn't one of our friends. He didn't even live in our neighborhood. Digging deeper, I found his social media: a fitness coach about 10 years younger than Marlene, posting endless photos of beach vacations, muscle flexes, and self-help quotes about living your truth. It made me sick. Not because she found someone younger, or fitter, or more reckless. It made me sick because I realized she had been building this new version of herself for months, while still climbing into our bed every night, while still smiling across the dinner table like nothing had changed. And there was more. Emails not just to Kellen, but to others. Men whose faces blurred together in a parade of shallow charm. Marlene had cast a wide net, lining up possibilities like someone preparing for auditions. It wasn't about love. It was about options. About chasing the high of being wanted again, even if it meant burning her entire life to the ground. I sat back in my chair, stunned at how blind I had been. How much I had trusted without question. And for the first time, a darker thought crept in: maybe the woman I loved hadn't existed for a very long time. Maybe I had been loving a ghost of someone who had already moved on without telling me. The worst part? She hadn't even had the courage to end things cleanly. She wanted me to sit quietly at home while she experimented with strangers, pretending we were on some noble journey of self-discovery. Well, I wasn't playing that game anymore. I decided right then I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. No angry calls. No desperate texts. Let her think she was still in control. Let her believe I was sitting at home, pathetically waiting. Because the truth was, I was just getting started. And when I was ready, she would know exactly how it felt to be blindsided. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there in our bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling every second of our 25 years together stretch out and unravel in my mind. It wasn't just betrayal I felt, it was something deeper. Like the foundations of my life had been quietly rotting for years, and now, all at once, the floor beneath me had given way. But instead of drowning, something inside me clicked into a cold, methodical rhythm. I wasn't going to be the abandoned husband sitting at home, wondering what went wrong. I was going to find every lie she told, every secret she buried. And I was going to watch her world fall apart without ever raising my voice. By the next morning, I had a plan. I wasn't going to follow her physically, not yet. Too risky. Instead, I decided to track her electronically. And it turned out she had made it almost too easy. Marlene had left her old fitness watch behind, the one we had linked to the family account years ago when we were trying to stay active together. She probably forgot it was still connected to the cloud. She thought she was being clever by using burner phones and secret emails. But she hadn't thought about the one piece of tech she'd thrown in a drawer without a second thought. Within minutes, I was able to access her activity history. GPS logs. Location pings. And there it was, a steady stream of visits to a hotel across town. Always around the same time, Friday nights, checking in late, checking out early Sunday mornings. It wasn't just once or twice. It was regular. Scheduled. Like a second life she stepped into as soon as she walked out our front door. I stared at the address for a long time, the cursor blinking at me, daring me to do something about it. Finally, I grabbed my keys, pulled on a jacket, and drove. The hotel wasn't a cheap roadside dive. It was an upscale boutique place, the kind with dim lighting, velvet chairs, and champagne waiting in ice buckets at the front desk. I didn't even have to go inside to feel it. The air around the building reeked of secrecy, of moments people didn't want written down. I sat across the street, engine off, watching. It felt surreal. Like I was watching someone else's life implode. An hour passed. Maybe more. I was just about to leave when I saw her. Marlene. Dressed nothing like the woman I knew, short leather jacket, heels too high for comfort, makeup heavy and bold. She walked out laughing, her hand on the arm of a man I instantly recognized from the social media stalking I'd done the night before, Kellen Pryor. He was even more smug-looking in real life, his arm casually sliding around her waist as they walked toward a waiting car. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. I just sat there and watched as my wife, the woman who had once cried at our wedding because she couldn't believe she found her person, melted into the arms of a stranger without a second thought. But even then I didn't break. Because now I had something better than anger. I had evidence. Proof. And more importantly, time. Marlene thought she had 6 months to play her games while I sat at home, grieving. She didn't realize those 6 months were going to be the slowest, most brutal undoing of everything she built. And when I finally confronted her, it wouldn't be with shouting or accusations. It would be with silence and a smile. Because by then I wouldn't be the one losing everything. She would. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Sitting in the house we built together, the one filled with memories that now felt like stage props for a lie, made my skin crawl. Instead, I checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, a forgettable place where no one would recognize me, where the silence felt like a clean slate. I lay on the stiff bed, laptop open, piecing together every detail of Marlene's double life. Over the next few days, I built what I came to call the album. It wasn't really a photo album in the sentimental sense. It was a growing collection of screenshots, receipts, hotel records, timestamps, and even security footage from a few places that still kept loose public surveillance. Nothing illegal. Nothing that could get me into trouble. Just facts. Cold, heavy facts that painted a picture Marlene could never explain away. Every Friday night she claimed she was working late, there was a check-in timestamp at the hotel. Every girls' night had a matching charge for 2 at an upscale restaurant under a different name but the same credit card she thought I wouldn't track. There were photos from that night I saw her with Kellen snapped through my windshield. Blurry but clear enough to see the way her body curved into his like they had done it 100 times before. And it wasn't just Kellen. Through more digging, I uncovered messages that hinted at least 2 other men she'd been exploring connections with. None of them serious. None of them permanent. Just reckless, hollow validation. A woman trying to claw back the feeling of being 20 years younger by setting fire to the life she already had. Piece by piece, the woman I thought I loved crumbled into someone I barely recognized. It was like learning she had been speaking another language behind my back for years and I was only now hearing the translation. But I didn't stop there. I started contacting a lawyer. Quietly. Carefully. A woman named Meredith Langston, sharp as a tack, absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting betrayed spouses. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a screaming match or some dramatic showdown. I wanted to protect what was still mine. The house. The savings. My dignity. Meredith helped me understand how to move without tipping Marlene off. How to gather financial records she had tried to shield. How to prepare everything so that when the moment came, I could walk away clean and leave Marlene to deal with the mess she created. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, staring at the stack of documents I would need to finalize it all, and feeling nothing. Not sadness. Not anger. Just clarity. The woman I married no longer existed. Maybe she never had. Maybe I had spent 25 years loving an idea and Marlene had spent just as long slowly deciding that idea wasn't enough. And now? Now, she was about to learn what it felt like to be left holding the broken pieces alone. 3 weeks after Marlene handed me the freedom contract, she sent me a message. A simple text, thinking of you. Hope you're doing okay. Just like that, casual, hollow, detached. As if our marriage was some minor footnote she could check in on like an old friend she hadn't seen in years. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurring together, feeling the weight of what they really meant. She didn't know I had been quietly preparing everything. She didn't know I had copies of her hotel bookings, the screenshots of her flirtations, the money she secretly siphoned from our joint account into a private one she thought I wouldn't find. She thought I was sitting at home, heartbroken and waiting. I didn't respond. Instead, I finalized the next step of my plan. Following Meredith's advice, I opened my own bank account. I began transferring my paychecks there, dollar by dollar, cutting off the slow bleed Marlene had been counting on. I started separating my life from hers in 100 tiny, silent ways. Every subscription, every utility bill, every piece of mail. It was tedious, exhausting work, but it was the kind of work that built walls she wouldn't be able to climb when the time came. Meanwhile, her location data continued to paint a vivid picture of her self-discovery. Different hotels, different faces, Kellen remained a constant, but there were others too. Always framed as harmless encounters in her mind, no doubt. Freedom, exploration, whatever buzzwords made it easier for her to pretend this wasn't betrayal. One evening, as I sat at the motel's cracked wooden desk, looking through the latest batch of screenshots, I asked myself a question that nearly knocked the air out of me. Was she ever going to come back? Not come back physically, that part was inevitable. Her 6 months would expire, and she would show up expecting a discussion, maybe even forgiveness. But mentally, emotionally, was there even a version of Marlene left who remembered who we had once been? The horrifying answer was no. The Marlene I loved had been fading for years, piece by piece, moment by moment, until she became a stranger wearing her face. The woman who wrote that contract wasn't my wife. She was someone else, someone colder, emptier, unreachable. And I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't even about her infidelity. It was about the death of something we had both promised to protect. But only one of us had kept that promise. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply closed the laptop, stood up, and looked at myself in the cracked mirror over the desk. I wasn't the same man who signed that marriage license 25 years ago. And I wasn't going to be the man who begged to stay married to a ghost. No, when the time came, I would be the man who already had one foot out the door and both hands free. Because while she was busy chasing strangers, I was busy building the life she never thought I would have the courage to create without her. And when she finally came back looking for the husband she abandoned, she was going to find nothing left to return to. Nothing at all. As the weeks bled into months, Marlene's messages came sporadically. A quick check-in here, a photo of a sunset she thought I might like, and out of the blue, hope you're smiling today. None of them asked real questions. None of them mentioned us. They were the kind of hollow gestures people send when they want to keep you tethered just enough to come back later and find the door still open. I never answered. I didn't need to. Every text she sent was another nail sealing the coffin of what we once had. Behind the scenes, my life was changing faster than she could imagine. I sold the second car, the one she loved, and transferred the funds to my private account. I closed the credit cards we shared. I cleaned out the attic, the basement, every drawer she had cluttered with pieces of a life she thought would wait for her. Every day I came home from work, I packed another box. Memories went into storage. Things she abandoned without a second thought got donated or thrown away. I stripped our house down to its bones. Not bitterly, not emotionally, methodically, like preparing a crime scene for investigation. Marlene's 6 months were almost up when the final piece fell into place. The lawyer called to confirm the paperwork was ready. No messy divorce battles. No screaming matches. Just signatures and a clean, precise cut. We had no minor children to fight over. The financial trail was airtight. Everything we had built would remain exactly where it belonged, in my name, in my hands. The night before her supposed return, I sat in the nearly empty house, breathing in the strange calm that had settled over everything. It didn't feel like a home anymore. Felt like a transition. A halfway point between the life I thought I had and the life I was about to claim. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt ready. And then, right on schedule, Marlene came back. It was almost comical how little she understood what she was walking into. She pulled into the driveway with a new haircut, a fake tan, and a designer suitcase. She looked younger somehow, or at least she tried to. But there was something brittle about her, something desperate in the way she adjusted her sunglasses before stepping out of the car. I watched from the living room window as she hesitated, probably noticing how different the house looked. I didn't rush to greet her. I didn't open the door. I let her walk up, key in hand, and try to unlock the door to a life that no longer existed. When she finally stepped inside, her smile faltered. She looked around at the empty walls, the bare floors, the absence of all the little things she had once cared about, and her face paled. She turned and found me standing in the hallway, hands in my pockets, calm as a man watching the tide roll out. "Lawson," she said, voice a little shaky. What happened?" I tilted my head slightly, studying her like a stranger. "I moved on," I said simply. Her mouth opened and closed like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. Stronger. Free. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the kitchen table where a neat stack of papers waited for her, the final step in a journey she had set in motion the moment she handed me that ridiculous freedom contract. She wanted freedom? She got it. Just not the way she expected. Marlene stared at the papers on the kitchen table for a long time. I didn't rush her. I didn't fill the silence. I let her sit in the echo of her own choices. After what felt like an hour, she finally spoke, her voice cracking just slightly. "You really did this," she said, not quite believing it. I nodded once, steady. "I did." She shuffled through the documents, looking for a loophole, a sign of hesitation, some opening where she could slip back into the life she thought would be waiting for her. But there was none. It was final. Clean. Irrevocable. At one point, she looked up at me, her eyes wide and pleading. I thought we could talk first. Figure things out." I didn't smile. I didn't sneer. I simply said, "You figured things out the moment you walked away." She tried to argue. She tried to cry. But every word she said sounded hollow even to her own ears. She knew she lost. Not just the marriage. Not just the house or the life we built. She lost something bigger, the quiet, patient man who had once loved her without limits. Without another word, she signed where she needed to sign. She left the keys on the table, small, metallic symbols of everything she thought she controlled. I watched her walk out of the house one final time, carrying only the suitcase she packed so confidently months ago. She never once looked back. When the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I had been holding. It didn't feel like losing. It felt like shedding old skin, a heavy, suffocating layer I didn't need anymore. Over the next few weeks, life began to quietly rebuild itself. Not in a dramatic, movie-style transformation. Not with wild parties or reckless decisions. Just small, steady moments of freedom. I slept better. I ate better. I started running again, not because someone told me to, but because it made me feel alive. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years. I picked up hobbies I had long forgotten. Photography. Woodworking. Learning Spanish, of all things. The house, once stripped bare, slowly began to feel like mine. I painted walls with colors I actually liked. I bought furniture that didn't come with memories attached. I filled the rooms not with things, but with peace. Real peace, the kind that doesn't beg to be earned or explained. One evening, months later, I stood in the backyard with a coffee in hand, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. The same oak tree I had once patched the fence near stood tall, golden in the fading light. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something simple, something powerful. I wasn't broken. I wasn't some abandoned man clinging to the wreckage. I was free. Truly fully free. And somewhere out there, Marlene was chasing a version of happiness that didn't even exist while I stood quietly, solidly at the start of a life that no longer needed her. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But out of a deep, unshakable understanding. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is leave. And sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is never let them come back.